So for more on this ongoing story, we have our correspondent, Roee Ruttenberg, standing by for us live in Washington, D.C. Good to have you, Roee. So why now, and what is the message the United States is sending to Russia?
Hey, Jonathan, we should add Canada to that list in the last few minutes, announcing its own expulsions as well. The U.S. government says that this is in response not just to that alleged nerve agent attack there in Salisbury, UK, but also in what they said is a drumbeat of aggressive actions by the Russians. They said the message is not to the Russian people, but to the Russian leadership, and they said they make a distinction. As an aside, senior administration officials this morning expressed their condolences over that fire over the weekend in Russia, but said this is meant specifically to send a clear message to the Russian leadership in Moscow that an attack on the soil of a U.S. ally would not be tolerated. Now, I think there's a few interesting things to point out. One, they were asked how long these individuals would have, 60 individuals and their families. They said they would have 1 week to leave the U.S. They said the Seattle consulate is going to be closed because they said that has the largest concentration of Russian intelligence officers that are gathering intel against the U.S. concentrated there at that consulate. They also said they're going through the official process of revoking the privilege of residence for the 12 individuals based at the Russian mission to the United Nations. I think it's interesting that this is coming, of course, this announcement, this background briefing coming from senior White House officials, both at the National Security Council and also the State Department, two agencies, departments undergoing significant change with the recent firings or resignations of their top leadership in the last few weeks following that attack over there in the UK. No clear indication from administration officials if there's a connection. In fact, they were asked about it and they declined to comment. I think also interesting that this announcement is not specifically coming from Donald Trump himself, right? This was not announced via tweet or not announced at the White House podium on in the Rose Garden. This is coming through a very formalized process, and that's quite different from a man that, you know, has tweeted the firing of his own Secretary of State. So I think that needs to be looked into this context as well. They were asked why it took so much time. They said they're following in the lead of their ally in the UK, that this was a coordinated effort. Now we've seen coordinated with several other countries. They were asked if they supported Russian requests to get a sample of that nerve agent that was allegedly used. They said they would not support that, again, following the UK's lead, that they would prefer that it go through an international NGO that has offered to help. And they said that this is really about standing in solidarity with the United Kingdom and sending a message that this sort of activity will not be tolerated. There's no indication if any of this has anything to do with the U.S. elections. Intelligence agencies in the U.S. suggesting high-level Russian interference. That argument being solidified in recent months. Some hesitation coming from the White House to respond to that directly. But again, they were asked if this is about the attack in the UK, and they said yes, and other activities. Jonathan?
And so, Roee, we've already seen Moscow say will likely expel the same number of American diplomats from Russia. There's been this back and forth, tit-for-tat political battle for a while now. Ties were already strained. What do you think this is going to mean for relations between the two countries?
Well, the U.S. says it reserves the right to respond to any direct Russian retaliation in response to this action. They did note that according to intelligence agencies in the U.S., there are more than 100 Russian intel officers operating in the U.S., various parts of the country. And the expulsion, if you do the math, 60 of them, that leaves at least 40 more left. We could see an additional response, an additional expulsion coming in the following few weeks if Russia does indeed act in kind, which is what, as you mentioned, it announced on Monday. This could be the beginning of a tit-for-tat procedure. You know, we understand that the president has not spoken with Vladimir Putin since Tuesday. We could also see them speaking by phone, at least trying to resolve this before it goes any further following this response from Moscow. Jonathan?
All right, Roee Ruttenberg live for us in Washington, D.C. Thanks so much for the update there.